Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unit 6. Wow, we are getting closer. Unit 6, and this particular unit has to do with human development, the different stages that we go through from birth, or actually even before birth, like conception, right? That uncomfortable conversation, to through the entire lifespan. So also be including, obviously towards the end of life and as you get older. So be thinking in this unit, please take lots of time to reflect and think back to your childhood and the experiences that you've had so far and how you've changed in your physical development. Like you are obviously not the same size you were when you were born. Also thinking about your cognitive development. So how your thinking skills, your rational thinking skills, your higher level thinking skills have developed over the years. You also could even be thinking about what is your social development? How have you developed socially when it comes to how you interact? Although it's kind of a weird thing to even talk about that right now when we are in a pandemic, which has completely taken us out of our social environment. And then the other thing is we even talk about things like moral development, like how did you develop your values, your belief systems, and how you follow them, and things like that. So I just found a couple quick pictures, and we're going to share pictures in class. That's definitely something we can do. So this is my daughter. Okay, I want to say she's probably like 6 months, maybe a little less. Oh, she's so cute. Look at that dress. And then this is actually me when I was, I don't know, I want to say it was like 8 or 9. I know I'm little. And that's with my dad. And that's one of my favorite photos because my dad actually passed away when I was pretty young. So that's a very special, I feel like I remember it, but remember it could be a constructed memory where I've kind of, because I've seen this picture so many times, I've created a memory. So, all right, so we're going to get started now. A couple of things I'm going to tell you while I'm pulling up the slides here. Let's get started here. That I am not going to be going through all of the slides, but I really want you to go back and take time and read through the slides that I don't go through. So just, I'm going to follow the slides here, then you go back and look through the slides yourself and just start reading through because it's got some important information, some research studies, goes into more depth than I'm going to go in today. So we are going to actually be covering module 42 and module 43 because we are going to have to condense things a little bit more as we get closer to the AP exam. So we're going to be talking about what it means to be a developmental psychologist. We're going to look at the different stages of physical development from conception, and through the lifespan. We're going to mainly focus on childhood, these first couple of modules. All right, so let's get started. All right, so we always talk about the different fields of study in psychology. And for this particular unit, what would it mean to be a developmental psychologist, which was definitely one of my interests when I was younger. It's when you're studying physical, cognitive, and social change throughout the lifespan, right? And some of you may have seen a developmental psychologist for different reasons. When we talk through this unit, we are going to be looking at 3 important themes that we talk about throughout the year. And this unit, it's another big discussion of these different themes in the personality unit, which comes after this one. So let's just quickly review them. You know what the nature versus nurture is. So nature versus nurture, like when it comes to you developing and becoming who you are, whether it's physically, cognitively, socially, what's coming from like just your genetic predispositions versus your experiences. All right, so we'll be talking about that. The other theme that we haven't talked as much about yet is continuity and stages. So meaning, are you going through actual physical stages? Because we're going to see theories where we're going to talk about different stages. Or is it just this kind of slow, gradual change that's going to happen through your life? So when it comes to your social development, is it like, okay, I'm in stage 1 and now in a year from now, I'm going to move to stage 2? Or is it just these slow little changes that maybe you don't even notice that are happening with how you're developing socially? And then, excuse me, the last one's called stability. and versus change. So meaning, is there some traits that you have that remain completely stable, and that they just don't change? So there are certain things that we know, genetic predispositions, that we're not going to have much control over, and that we have to just recognize are part of our stable, consistent self. And then there's the other part that is going to change. So certain parts of our thinking are going to remain the same. Remember, we did say that sometimes maybe when it comes to like your overall processing speed and stuff like that, that could be relatively stable. All right, so let's move on. You do want to study those. It's important. We'll keep referencing them throughout the year. So you want to, like I mentioned, just keep thinking about yourself. How were you? How are you the same? How are you different? We are going to immediately get into the start of prenatal development, from conception to when you're with the actual physical birth. I mean, I used to love to look at these pictures when I was pregnant with my kids. And I know when you're not pregnant, or you're not, actually having a family, that sometimes looking at these pictures is kind of like, yeah, it's just different. It's like almost like an alien, right? All right. So conception. So the path to life begins with the release of an egg from the mother's ovary. And it's basically the sperm is going to attach itself and eat away at the egg's protective coating. It's a miracle. And it enters through the egg surface, blocking out the other sperm. So it's just the one sperm, right? And it fuses, the two fuse, and they become one. It's miraculous. So the first stage, there's 3 stages in the prenatal development. The first one, which is going to be the first 2 weeks, is the zygote stage. There's lots of rapid cell development. And they begin to specialize in structure and function to start to develop brain tissues, intestine tissues, heart tissues. After 2 weeks, you are going to, like, when you get from the zygote stage, after the 2 weeks, you are going to actually, it's going to go to the embryonic stage. And the embryonic stage is going to be from 6 weeks. So after the 2 weeks, so the 6 weeks after that is when you're going to actually start to see changes when it comes to, developing, actually seeing organs that are beginning to develop, like the heart, and the heart actually starting to beat. All right. So the embryonic stage, the inner cells become the embryo. Many of its outer cells become the placenta. Interesting. The life link. We know that the placenta is going to be that link that's going to transfer the nutrients, when the mother is eating and making sure providing nutrients to the embryo, and then eventually the fetus. So the next stage, after 9 weeks, it is now called a fetus. And it remains, it's the fetus until birth. And it is incredible to see the difference. Like, for example, after 6 months, there's a really good chance that the fetus can actually survive. Right. And then you got the face, you can start to see the hands, the feet have forms. And this is even just at the 9th week. And then 16th week, actually, it's really starting to look much more human, but also can even fit in the palm of your hand. Just think of that, 3 ounces. And I said the 16th week, right? So let's answer this question real quick. You do want to remember the order. That is a question that tends to be on the AP exam. What is the prenatal development sequence? You are correct. You're always getting those right. So proud of you. Zygote, embryo, fetus. D. So what do we know about the development of language in the womb? So we just definitely know that they are hearing things. And they do start to recognize and become familiar with different sounds. And, I'll say, talk about just after birth, the melodic ups and downs of newborns' cries bear the tuneful signature of their mother's native tongue. So they're already just familiar with those sounds. We do have to talk about that in the prenatal development, there is something called teratogens. And teratogens, they call them monster makers. And it's any type of, I think I mentioned it last unit. They're chemicals, things that could potentially affect the prenatal development. In most cases, the mother might be able to obviously control what she is putting into her body. But the other part, there sometimes could be things externally from the environment that she does not have control over. But there, at some point when it causes harm, that is where it becomes a teratogen. Here are some examples: alcohol, tobacco use, drug use, viruses that the mother contracts. So obviously it's been a scary time here during the pandemic. Certain medications taken by the mother. And we also, I will even add, when I was pregnant, I didn't eat seafood, raw fish, or actually I ate seafood, but not raw fish. Making sure that even just the chemical products I might use in my hair that maybe potentially can get in the bloodstream or something like that. All right. So alcohol is one we really do talk about more specifically. They basically say do not drink at all because they don't really know how much alcohol consumption can affect the fetus. But they definitely know that if there's a lot of alcohol use, that, and you see here, there's a rat study where they actually became addicted, the alcohol. And we find that with other drugs too, that the body, we know that withdrawal symptoms or tolerance could even develop, in the fetus. So, obviously don't drink, don't do drugs, don't smoke, any of those things. But persistent heavy drinking puts the fetus at risk for a dangerously low birth weight, birth defects, future behavior problems, and lower intelligence. And then there's actually a disorder. It's called fetal alcohol syndrome. Very small percentage of students. I think there's a lot of children that are born with that. There's a lot of awareness about being healthy during pregnancy and prenatal health. So it's very rare, but this is where lifelong physical and mental abnormalities. All right. Juliet is experiencing lifelong physical and mental abnormalities because her mother consumed alcohol while she was pregnant. The alcohol, because of its damage caused, is considered what is it? You know what it is now. Oh, gotta write again. Teratogen C. All right. So the other thing that we're going to talk about, there's something when we talk about the whole nature side, remember the whole nature nurture, babies, and this is just such a wonderful thing. If you have an opportunity, if you have a little cousin, little brother, sister, a child yourself, that you could see reflexes. And there are different types. I'm going to actually go to here are the different types. The rooting reflex, the sucking reflex, grasping reflex, startle reflex, and Babinski reflex. So rooting is like suckling, and or rooting is actually turning your head to look for the food source. So if you stroke the corner of the mouth, and they'll kind of follow and look for the food source. And then there's also sucking reflex. When the baby's mouth is touched, the baby will begin to suck, like sucking on a bottle. Grasping is you can, if you put your finger here and kind of stroke, they will kind of grasp your finger, like kind of hold on to their food source. And then there's a startle reflex. Thank goodness for the right. That might already be the sympathetic nervous system kicking in. Hear a loud, sudden movement, they will, respond with a cry and extending their arms. That's the other thing too, is they kind of extend out. The Babinski is one that you might not be as familiar with, and that is where the sole of the foot has been stroked. The big toe then moves upward toward the top surface of the foot. and the other toes fan out. So, you know, it's these natural reflexes, and they do actually check these reflexes right when the child is born. All right. So, um, yeah, I'm kind of remembering what this slide says. Uh, so it's just the other thing that we want to recognize is that they do have decreasing responsiveness to things that they are more familiar with. So, you know, novel things, you might see a level of responsiveness, so they look excited and, you know, it's new. But then if you just keep showing the same thing in their crib, that they just get familiar with it. And so it's always good to having, you know, new things, increasing stimulation, but also having consistency for them. So, as infants gain familiarity with repeated exposure to a visual stimulus, their interest wanes and they look away sooner. The decrease in an infant's responsiveness, and see if you guys can remember this. We actually talked about this in a previous unit because it's kind of similar to sensory adaptation. So it's habituation. So because it's habitual and they just lose responsiveness, it's not as familiar. So that is module 42. We're going to actually move to module 43 right now. So see, that was pretty short. So now this one, we're going to go into a little bit more depth with physical development and talking about what's happening neurologically, you know, with the brain and also the development of motor skills. So we want to use, there's a term that sometimes is actually misused. It's maturation. And it is the biological, notice I said biological growth that enables orderly changes in behavior relatively uninfluenced by experience. So these are the actual biological physical changes that we will see throughout life that aren't necessarily influenced or are not influenced by experiences, by environmental influences. And we use, when we talk about somebody maturing, we sometimes misuse that and we almost talk about it based on experiences, but it's actually more about your biological physical changes. Let's look at this. Wow. This is one of my favorite pictures. First off, make a great little art piece on your wall. But this is your brain development in the first few months of life. And as you can see, the child matures, the neural networks grow increasingly complex. So I would just take a moment and focus on that. So the rapid development helps explain why infant brain size increases rapidly in the early days. From ages 3 to 6, the most rapid growth was in the frontal lobes, which enable rational planning. During those years, the child's brain requires a vast amounts of energy. So from ages 3 to 6, there is the initial rapid rational development. So, you know, it doesn't mean that you're completely irrational even at a young age because it's developing, but it needs a lot of growth. And we know that that last development doesn't happen until like your early 20s. All right. And so one of the things in early development of like being rational is just being able to control your attention, your behavior, emotional control, starting to develop that. So we also know that those association areas, remember each of the lobes has an association area, and those are for some of those higher level thinking abilities. All right. And there's also going to be the actual development, you know, the nature part. Remember, we talked about with having the ability to speak, you know, when it comes to language, agility, as in your ability to kind of move quickly and move through, you know, different obstacles and, you know, navigating through your environment. And under the influence of adrenal hormones, tens of billions of synapses form and organize while a use it or losing pruning process shuts down unused links. So there's a lot of formation, but then when things just aren't being used, then they might start to prune it a little bit. And shuts down the unused link. So that's one thing, is keeping your mind active is always a good thing, except for when you're sleeping. You want to rest. Let your mind kind of have its own thing going on. All right, so this one, which of the following is true of early formation of brain cells? They form at a constant rate throughout the prenatal period. They begin forming slowly, and then the rate increases throughout prenatal development. They form slowly during the prenatal period, and then the rate increases after birth. They form at a constantly increasing rate prenatally and in early childhood. They are overproduced early in the prenatal period, and the rate decreases and stabilizes. This is a tough one. Right. So when we're talking about early formation of brain cells, we would definitely say that they form slowly during the prenatal, and then the rate increases after birth. All right. So maturation, that is definitely more important to, pay attention to and it's more about the biology. I think I already mentioned this, so we're actually going to skip over this. All right, explains why. So this one, you want to be about the biology, right? The biological processes. So this one, the best answer would be we stand before we walk, because this is a biological stage that you go through and how you're maturing. And let's actually talk about that. So when it comes to the developmental stages, it goes from sit to crawl to stand to walk, right? And maybe you can even be thinking, ask your parents, when was the first time that you started to walk? They probably have a good story about that. They might also probably have a story about the first time that what your first word was. That's always a good question to ask. But let's talk about the time periods for this. So we talk about average time, and one of the ways, remember, that we would study this is we would do a cross-sectional study. This is a great example of doing cross-sectional research, because what's the best way to figure out what the average age that kids start to walk is to take different cross-sections, take a bunch of 10-month-olds, 11-month-olds, 12-month-olds, 13-month-olds, and see which group seems to have more walkers. So they say about 15 months. I know it's later than you would think. Most kids are walking, 90%. 11 months, it's on the lower end. So if you were an early walker, good for you, that's great. But most, it's, after 15 months is where we might be concerned if you're not walking. All right. Nurture may amend what nature intends. In some regions of Africa, Caribbean, and India, caregivers often massage and exercise babies, which can accelerate the process of learning to walk. That's an interesting little thing. All right, so their average walking age might be a little sooner than ours. Yeah, no, don't just pop them in front of the television, right? Remember that. So this is just talking about early memory. So let's just look at these studies a little bit. Studies suggest that we consciously recall little from before age 4. Mice and monkeys also forget their early life as rapid neuron growth disrupts. We talked about this, that we may think we remember things earlier than 4, but most often it was probably a constructive memory through a conversation with your family or something. So as you get older, it does wane. Around 4 or 5, you may start to actually remember things. And I mean like your early childhood experiences. The brain areas underlying memories, such as the hippocampus and frontal lobes, continue. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry. They continue to mature during and after adolescence. So we will talk about some of our earliest childhood memories. Sometimes I even bring that up during the memory unit, so we may have already talked about it. So we can move on. And is there nonverbal memory? So researcher Carolyn Rovey-Collier observed nonverbal infant memory. Her colicky 2-month-old Benjamin could be calmed by moving a crib mobile. Wary of hitting the mobile, she strung a cloth ribbon connecting the mobile to Benjamin's foot. Soon he was kicking his foot to move the mobile. So it's like there's learning, there's actual learning that's taking place. He's learning what he actually needs to do to get the mobile to move. All right, so they can learn. All right, and I think that's it. We went through it pretty quickly. This is going to be a fun unit. We look forward to it. Get those baby pictures, find those baby pictures. We're going to have I think we need to, what's it called? What's the thing called where you share, think, pair, share now, show and tell. That's what it is. Let's have a show and tell day. All right. Bye, everybody. Take care.